The autumn wind carried secrets through the cobblestone streets of Nighthaven, swirling golden leaves into spirals that danced like whispered confessions. Oscar Darkspire walked alone through the village square, his massive frame casting long shadows across the merchant's stalls as the setting sun painted the sky in shades of blood, orange and violet. His black hair fell past his shoulders, moving like dark water with each deliberate step, and his presence commanded silence from those who recognized the mark of the Alpha King. They bowed their heads, but he barely noticed. His mind was elsewhere, restless, hungry for something he could not name. Then he saw it. A small leather-bound book lying abandoned near the fountain, its crimson cover stark against the gray stone. Something pulled him toward it, an invisible thread tugging at his chest. He should have walked past. A king does not concern himself with lost belongings. But his hand reached down, fingers brushing the soft leather, and before reason could intervene, he opened it. The handwriting was delicate, feminine, each letter formed with careful attention as though the writer had poured her very soul onto the pages. His eyes scanned the first entry, then stopped. His name. His name written over and over, surrounded by words that made something unfamiliar stir deep within his ribs. When Oscar walks through the village, the world holds its breath. I hold mine too, but for different reasons. They fear his power. I fear the way my heart forgets to beat when our eyes meet, even for a fleeting second. He does not see me. He cannot know that every night I write his name like a prayer, hoping the universe will hear and grant me one impossible wish to be seen by him, truly seen, not as a subject, but as a woman who would give anything to know the man beneath the crown. Oscar's throat tightened. He turned another page, then another, unable to stop. The words were raw, unguarded, written by someone who believed no eyes but hers would ever read them. I dream of running my fingers through his black hair, of feeling his arms around me not in conquest but in surrender. I dream of being the place where the fierce Alpha King lays down his armor. They say he is untouchable, unreachable, forged from iron and ice. But I see the loneliness in his eyes when he thinks no one is watching. I see it because I carry the same ache. His heartbeat quickened. A sensation so foreign it almost felt like pain. In all his years, in all the battles won and kingdoms conquered, no one had ever spoken to him like this. Women approached him with calculation or fear, with ambition gleaming in their eyes. They wanted his power, his status, his protection. But this unknown writer wanted something else entirely. She wanted him. He was so absorbed in the pages that he did not hear the footsteps approaching until a sharp intake of breath shattered his concentration. No. Oh, no, no, no. Oscar looked up. Before him stood a young woman he had never truly noticed before, though now she seemed to illuminate the dimming square with an otherworldly light. Her skin was pale as moonlight, her hair a cascade of white silk that fell to her waist. She wore a crimson dress that clung to her slender frame, and her eyes, wide with horror, were the color of storm clouds before lightning strikes. She was staring at the diary in his hands, as though witnessing her own execution. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world contracted to just this, just them, standing in the fading light with all her secrets exposed between them. "Is what's written here true?" Oscar asked, his voice rougher than he intended. He held up the diary and watched as her pale cheeks flushed with color so deep it matched her dress. Before we begin the story, I want to thank everyone who supports the channel and loves our Alpha King romances. In the pinned comment, you'll find a special selection of the best Amazon books that inspire our stories. If you purchase any book through those links, you'll be directly supporting the channel and helping us create more stories. Tell us where you're watching from and how old you are in the comments. I hope you enjoy the story. Astrid Ravenscar had imagined this moment in 1,000 different nightmares. Her diary, her most private thoughts, her embarrassing confessions about the Alpha King exposed. But never, in any version of this horror, had she imagined him standing there looking at her like that. Not with mockery or disgust, but with something that made her knees weak. Intensity. Curiosity. And beneath it all, something that looked almost like hope. Her voice failed. She wanted to run, to disappear into the shadows and never emerge. But she had spent 18 years of her life being taught by her warrior father never to flee from anything, even shame. So she lifted her chin, squared her shoulders, and met his gaze. Yes, every word is true. The admission hung between them like a held breath. Oscar took a step toward her, and another, until he was close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his dark eyes, could smell the scent of pine and leather that clung to him. Then you are either very brave or very foolish, he said quietly. To love someone who could destroy you with a word. I have always been both, Astrid replied, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. But you taught me something, Alpha King, though you never knew you were my teacher. What did I teach you? That power without purpose is just noise. That strength means nothing if you are too afraid to be vulnerable. She gestured to the diary. I wrote those words knowing they made me weak. I wrote them anyway. That is my power. Something shifted in Oscar's expression, a crack forming in the armor he had worn for so long, he had forgotten what his true face looked like underneath. He looked down at the diary, then back at her, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. You see loneliness in my eyes. Do you know why? She shook her head. Because until this moment, until I read your words, I believed I was the only one who felt it. The only one who understood that strength can be a prison. That being feared means being alone. He took another step closer. So close now she could feel the heat radiating from his body. You wrote that you want to be seen. Astrid Ravenscar, I see you, and I am terrified of what that means. Her name on his lips was a revelation. He knew her name. All this time, she thought she was invisible to him. Just another face in the crowds that parted when he passed. But he knew her name. Why terrified? She breathed. Because I have built my entire existence on being untouchable. And you, with your words, with your impossible honesty, have touched something in me I thought had died long ago. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. And when she did not, he cupped her face with one large hand, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. Tell me to walk away. Tell me this is madness. Astrid closed her eyes at his touch, every nerve ending in her body suddenly alive. This is madness, she whispered. But I have been mad for you since the first time I saw you smile at a child in the market. You thought no one was watching. But I was. I am always watching. The confession was too much, too raw, but there was no taking it back now. The diary lay at their feet where he had dropped it, all her secrets spilled onto the cobblestones. There was nothing left to hide. Then we will be mad together, Oscar said, and before she could process the words, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as though he was afraid she might shatter. But when she responded, when her hands came up to tangle in his long black hair the way she had dreamed of doing for so long, something primal awoke in him. He deepened the kiss, pulling her against his chest, and she melted into him, feeling simultaneously fragile and invincible in his arms. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the square had grown dark around them. Lanterns flickered to life in windows, and somewhere a bell tolled the hour, but neither of them moved. This changes everything, Oscar said, resting his forehead against hers. I know, Astrid replied. The court will not approve. They will say you are too young, too unknown, too... Beneath you? She finished, a hint of steel entering her voice. Let them say it. I do not write love letters to you for approval, Oscar Darkspire. I write them because my heart knows no other language. He pulled back to look at her. Really look at her, and what he saw made his chest ache. She was fierce and fragile all at once, this girl-woman with white hair and storm eyes. She was everything he had not known he was searching for. Walk with me, he said, offering his hand. Let me see the woman who dared to love the monster. Astrid took his hand, her smaller fingers disappearing into his calloused palm. You are no monster, my king. Monsters do not have lonely eyes. Monsters do not stop to smile at children when they think no one is watching. As they walked through the darkening streets of Nighthaven, their intertwined hands visible to anyone who cared to look, Oscar Darkspire felt something he had not felt in decades. He felt like he was coming home. The weeks that followed were a study in duality. To the world, Oscar remained the Alpha King, fierce and unyielding. In council meetings, his word was law, his presence a force that made grown men tremble. He negotiated treaties with neighboring kingdoms with ruthless efficiency, crushed threats to his realm with merciless precision. The mask he wore was one of absolute power, and it fit him perfectly because he had been wearing it his entire life. But when he was with Astrid, the mask came off. In the privacy of his chambers, in the secret places they discovered together, the hidden gardens and moonlit clearings, he became someone else entirely. He became the man she had seen in those unguarded moments, the man she had written about with such tender accuracy. He would braid her white hair while she told him stories of her childhood, of growing up with a father who taught her to wield a sword before she could read. His fingers, which could crush bone and rend flesh, moved with infinite gentleness through her silken strands. My father said a woman who cannot defend herself is a prisoner to the mercy of others, Astrid told him one evening as they sat by the fire in his private quarters. He trained me like he would have trained a son. Some in the village called it unnatural, but he said I had the heart of a warrior. He was right, Oscar murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. I have seen you train. You move like water and strike like lightning. She turned in his arms, her expression serious. Does it bother you? That I am not soft, not helpless. It is what drew me to you, beyond even your words. He tucked a strand of white hair behind her ear. I do not want a woman who needs me to be whole. I want a woman who chooses me anyway. That is you, Astrid. You are already complete. And yet you chose this complicated, damaged man. You are not damaged, she said fiercely. You are careful. There is a difference. He smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually stern face into something almost boyish. You defend me even from my own self-judgment. How did I exist before you? Lonely, she said simply, echoing the words she had written in her diary. As was I. But their growing love did not exist in a vacuum. The court buzzed with speculation and disapproval. Astrid was summoned to appear before the Council of Elders 3 weeks after that first kiss in the square. She entered the council chamber in her crimson dress, her white hair bound in a warrior's braid. Oscar sat at the head of the long table, his face an unreadable mask, but she saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the arms of his chair. Astrid Ravenscar, Elder Morwen began, her voice dripping with disdain. You have been seen in the company of our Alpha King with inappropriate frequency. Some say you have bewitched him with dark magic. Others say you are simply a foolish girl reaching above her station. What say you to these accusations? Astrid met the elder's gaze without flinching. I say that I love him. Not his crown, not his power, not his wealth. I loved him when I was nobody, when I believed he would never look at me twice. I wrote my love in secret, expecting nothing in return. If that is witchcraft, then the only spell I cast is honesty. Honesty? Another elder scoffed. What does a girl of 18 know of love? Of the burden of standing beside a king? More than you think, Astrid said coldly. I know that loving someone means seeing them at their worst and choosing to stay. I know that standing beside someone does not mean standing behind them or above them, but truly beside them, as an equal. I know that. Enough. Oscar's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. He stood, and even the elders fell silent. You question her worthiness? Then question mine as well. For I am the one who picked up her diary. I am the one who read her words and felt my dead heart beat for the first time in years. I am the one who chose her, who continues to choose her every single day. He moved around the table, each step deliberate, until he stood beside Astrid. He took her hand in his, the gesture visible to everyone. You see a girl, he continued, his voice dropping to something dangerous. I see a warrior who faces this council with more courage than most of you showed on the battlefield. You see someone reaching above her station. I see the only person who has ever dared to reach for me, not for what I can give her, but for who I am beneath this crown. Elder Morwen's face purpled. My king, you are young still. You have time to find a suitable. I have found her. The finality in his voice allowed no argument. And if this council cannot accept that, then perhaps it is the council that needs to change. Not my choice. The silence that followed was absolute. Astrid felt her heart hammering against her ribs, felt the weight of every eye in the room upon them. But Oscar's hand was steady in hers, an anchor in the storm. Finally, Elder Theron, the oldest of the council, spoke. The girl has spirit. I will grant her that. And you, my king, have not looked this alive in all the years I have served you. He leaned back in his chair, studying them both. Perhaps that is worth more than lineage or political advantage. Perhaps. It was not approval, but it was not condemnation either. It was a crack in the wall, and that was enough. As they left the council chamber together, Astrid felt Oscar's hand tremble slightly in hers. She glanced up at him, saw the tension bleeding from his shoulders, now that they were away from judging eyes. You did not have to do that, she said softly. Defy the entire council for me. He stopped walking, turned to face her fully. Astrid, I would burn this entire kingdom to ash before I let anyone take you from me. But I hope it never comes to that, because you would be disappointed in me for the destruction. His hand came up to cup her cheek. You make me want to be better. Not stronger, not more powerful. Better. Do you understand how rare that is? She turned her face into his palm, pressing a kiss there. Show me, she whispered. Show you what? Show me all of you. Not the king, not the warrior. Show me Oscar, the man who stops to smile at children, the man who braids my hair, the man who reads love letters and remembers every word. Something in his eyes shifted, softened. Are you certain? That man is not always easy to be around. He carries scars you cannot see. Then let me help you carry them, she said simply. That is what love is it not? Sharing the weight? Over the following months, Oscar did exactly that. He shared stories he had never told anyone, revealed wounds that had never healed. He told her about his father, a cruel king who believed love was weakness, who beat that belief into his son until Oscar learned to bury every soft emotion deep where it could not be used against him. He died when I was 16, Oscar said one night, as they lay together beneath the stars on the roof of the castle, a secret place Astrid had discovered and claimed as theirs. And I became king overnight. They said I was too young, too inexperienced. So I made myself into something they could not question. I became harder than stone, colder than winter. I became exactly what my father wanted me to be. Astrid traced patterns on his chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heart beneath her palm. But that is not who you are. Not really. No, he admitted. But I wore the mask so long I forgot there was a face underneath. Until your words reminded me that I was human before I was king." She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. The moonlight caught in her white hair, making her look ethereal, like a spirit made flesh. "Then let me remind you every day. Let me be the one who sees Oscar, not just the Alpha King." He reached up, threading his fingers through her hair, pulling her down for a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened into something more desperate, more necessary. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I do not deserve you," he whispered. "Probably not," she agreed, her lips curving into a smile. "But you are stuck with me anyway." As their relationship deepened, so did Astrid's integration into the kingdom's life. But she refused to be merely the king's beloved, a pretty ornament to smile and wave. She continued her warrior training, often sparring with Oscar's elite guard. At first, they treated her with barely concealed amusement. A girl with a sword, how quaint. That amusement died quickly. The first time she disarmed Captain Gregor, a man twice her size with 20 years of battlefield experience, the entire training yard fell silent. She stood over him, her blade at his throat, her white hair wild around her flushed face, and smiled. "I believe that is matched to me, Captain," she said sweetly, offering him a hand up. From that day forward, the guard treated her with respect. But more than that, they began to love her. Because she trained beside them, bled beside them, and never asked for special treatment because she shared the king's bed. Oscar watched these transformations with a mixture of pride and possessive hunger. He loved seeing her thrive, loved watching her earn her place not through him, but through her own merit. But when other men looked at her with appreciation, when she laughed at their jokes or clapped them on the shoulder after a good match, something primal and jealous stirred in his chest. One evening, after watching her spar brilliantly with a young guard who looked at her like she hung the moon, Oscar pulled her aside roughly once they were alone. "Do you enjoy it?" he growled, backing her against the stone wall of the corridor. "Enjoy what?" She looked up at him, genuine confusion in her eyes. "Making me insane, letting them touch you, laugh with you." His hands bracketed her head, caging her in. To anyone else, he would look threatening, but she saw the vulnerability beneath the possessiveness. "Oscar," she said gently, placing her palm against his cheek. "They are my brothers in arms. That is all. My heart belongs to you. Only you. Has anything I have done, anything I have said made you doubt that?" He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. "No, but I am not rational when it comes to you. I want to lock you away where only I can see you, where only I can make you smile like that. And I hate myself for wanting it, because I know you need to be free. Listen to me." She took his face in both hands, forcing him to look at her. "I choose to be here. I choose you. Not because you demand it, not because you cage me, but because you do not. You let me be who I am. That is why I love you. Do you understand?" He nodded slowly, something easing in his expression. Then he kissed her, hard and claiming, pouring all his possessive hunger into the press of his lips. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "Mine," he whispered against her mouth. "Yours," she agreed. "But I am also my own. Can you live with that duality?" "I must," he said, "because the alternative is losing you, and that would destroy me." It was the most honest he had ever been, and she rewarded that honesty by pulling him down for another kiss. This one softer, sweeter, a promise rather than a claim. But their happiness was not meant to remain unchallenged. 6 months into their relationship, a threat emerged from the northern territories. The Iron Wolves, a pack of rogue shifters led by a vicious alpha named Caney Bloodmaw, began raiding villages along the border. Oscar called his war council, and for the first time, Astrid was invited to attend. She stood beside him as he reviewed maps and strategies, her input valued, her tactical mind sharp and clear. "They are testing you," she said, studying the pattern of attacks. "They strike and retreat, strike and retreat. They want to see how quickly you respond, where your defenses are weakest." "Agreed," Captain Gregor said, nodding at her. "But why now? Caney has stayed in his territory for years." "Because he knows about her," Oscar said quietly, his eyes on Astrid. "He knows I have something to lose now. Someone to lose." The room fell silent. Astrid felt every eye turn to her, felt the weight of that realization. "Then send me away," she said, her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. "Remove his target." "No." Oscar's voice was absolute. "That is what he wants. He wants me to show weakness, to hide what I love. I will not give him that satisfaction." "Then what will you give him?" she asked. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. This was the Alpha King, the warrior, the king who had crushed rebellions and conquered kingdoms. War. Total, unrelenting war. And he will learn what happens when someone threatens what is mine. The campaign against the Iron Wolves was brutal and swift. Oscar led his forces personally, and for the first time, Astrid understood the full scope of his power. In battle, he was a force of nature, his massive frame cutting through enemies like a scythe through wheat. His black hair flew behind him as he moved, and his roar shook the battlefield. But he had made one mistake. He had forbidden Astrid from joining the fight. "You will stay here where it is safe," he had ordered the night before he left. "I cannot focus on battle if I am worrying about you." "I am not helpless," she had argued. "I am a trained warrior. I can fight beside you." "I know you are not helpless, but I love you, and love makes me vulnerable. Do you understand? If I see you fall, if I see you hurt, I will lose all reason. I will become something even I fear. So please, for me, stay safe." She had agreed, though it grated against every instinct. She watched him ride out with his army, her heart in her throat, and tried to believe he would return. But Caney Bloodmaw was more cunning than they anticipated. While Oscar's main force engaged the Iron Wolves in the northern mountains, a smaller group split off and circled back, heading straight for the capital, straight for Nighthaven, straight for Astrid. She was in the training yard when the alarm bells rang. She looked up, saw smoke rising from the eastern gate, and knew. They were coming for her. The castle guards scrambled to defensive positions, but Astrid did not run to safety. She ran for the armory, strapped on leather armor, and grabbed her sword. If they wanted her, they would have to take her from a pile of her enemies' corpses. The Iron Wolves poured through the breached gate like a dark tide. They were larger than normal shifters, twisted by dark magic into something monstrous. Their eyes glowed yellow in the dim light, and their howls shook the windows. Astrid met them in the courtyard, her blade singing as it cut through the first attacker. Blood sprayed across the cobblestones, across her crimson dress that she still wore under her armor like a talisman. She fought like her father had taught her, like the guards had sparred with her, like her life and the lives of everyone she loved depended on it. Because they did. One after another, the Iron Wolves fell to her blade. She was a whirlwind of white hair and red fabric and steel, beautiful and terrible all at once. The castle guards rallied around her, drawing strength from her courage. But there were too many. For every wolf she cut down, 2 more appeared. Her arms grew heavy, her breath came in ragged gasps. Still, she did not stop. Then Caney Bloodmaw himself stepped into the courtyard. He was massive, even in human form, covered in ritual scars and smelling of blood and dark magic. He smiled at her, showing too many teeth. "The little queen," he purred. "You have more fight in you than I expected. Perhaps I will keep you alive. Let Oscar watch as I break you piece by piece." "Come and try," Astrid spat, raising her sword despite the trembling in her arms. Caney laughed and shifted, becoming something between wolf and nightmare. He lunged at her with speed that should have been impossible for something his size. Astrid dodged, barely, feeling claws rake across her shoulder. Pain bloomed, hot and sharp, but she ignored it. She rolled, came up swinging, and her blade found flesh. Caney howled, more in rage than pain, and backhanded her across the courtyard. She hit the stone wall hard, felt ribs crack, tasted blood. Her sword clattered from her grip. Caney advanced slowly, savoring his victory. "This is it," she thought dimly. "This is how I die." And she found she was not afraid, only sad. Sad that she would not see Oscar again. Sad that she would not be able to tell him one more time that she loved him. Caney reared back for the killing blow. Then the world exploded with sound and fury. Oscar hit Caney like an avalanche, like the wrath of the gods made flesh. He had shifted into his alpha form, something rarely seen, something terrifying to behold. He was larger than Caney, larger than any shifter Astrid had ever seen, his black fur rippling with power, his eyes burning with inhuman rage. The battle that followed was primal and vicious. The two alphas tore at each other, rolled across blood-slicked stones, shook the very foundations of the castle with the force of their blows. But Oscar fought with something Caney could never match. He fought with love-fueled desperation, with the knowledge that the woman he loved lay broken against the wall. When Oscar finally closed his jaws around Caney's throat and ripped, ending the threat forever, his roar of victory echoed across the kingdom. Then he shifted back to human form and ran to Astrid. She was unconscious, blood seeping from multiple wounds, her white hair stained crimson. Oscar gathered her into his arms, feeling something break inside his chest. "No," he whispered. "No, you do not get to leave me. Not after everything. Not after you taught me how to feel again." His voice cracked. "Astrid, please, come back to me." Her eyes fluttered open, gray and clouded with pain, but when they focused on his face, she smiled. "You came back," she whispered. "Always," he said, pressing his forehead to hers as healers rushed forward. "I will always come back to you, just as you will always come back to me. Do you hear me? You do not get to die. I forbid it." She laughed weakly, then coughed, and blood flecked her lips. "You cannot command death, my king." "Watch me," he growled, then looked at the healers. "Save her. I do not care what it costs, what magic you must use. Save her, or I burn this kingdom to the ground." For 3 days, Astrid danced between life and death. Oscar never left her side. He held her hand, whispered to her, begged her to fight. The kingdom held its breath, waiting. On the 3rd night, when the moon was full and high, Astrid opened her eyes. Oscar, who had not slept in 72 hours, looked like a ghost of himself. His black hair was tangled, his face haggard. But when he saw her awake, truly awake, something in him broke open. "You came back," he said, echoing her words from the battle. "Always," she whispered, echoing his response. "Did you think I would leave you alone? You cannot function without me." He laughed, the sound broken and beautiful. "No, I cannot. I have proven that quite thoroughly these past days. The council is ready to declare me insane." "You are insane," she said, her hand coming up to touch his face. "But you are mine, and I am yours, and that is all that matters." He captured her hand, pressed kisses to her palm, her wrist, anywhere he could reach. "When you are healed, we will marry. I do not care about tradition or protocols or anything the council says. You are my mate, Astrid Ravenscar. You proved that by fighting for my kingdom while I was gone. You proved that by surviving when you should have died." "Is that a proposal?" she asked, amusement coloring her weak voice. "It is a fact," he said. "You are mine, and I am yours, and we will make it official before the gods and the kingdom and anyone else who wants to witness it." "Then yes," she whispered. "Yes to you. Yes to this insanity. Yes to everything." Their wedding took place 3 months later, after Astrid had fully healed. It was held in the same courtyard where she had fought the iron wolves, where her blood had stained the stones. She wore a dress of pure white, her hair unbound and flowing like a river of moonlight. Oscar wore his formal armor, his long black hair braided with silver thread. When he saw her walking toward him, his breath caught. She was radiant, powerful, ethereal. She was everything. "You look like a dream," he murmured as she took his hand. "Then never wake up," she replied, smiling up at him with those storm-gray eyes. The ceremony was traditional in all the ways that mattered, and revolutionary in all the ways that did not. Astrid insisted on adding a warrior's oath to the traditional marriage vows, pledging not just her love, but her blade to his service, as he pledged his to hers. "I vow to stand beside you," she said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "Not behind, not above, but beside. I vow to be your equal in all things, your partner in all things. I vow to challenge you when you are wrong, support you when you are right, and love you even when you are unbearable. This I swear on my life, my sword, and my heart." Oscar's vows were simpler, but no less powerful. "I vow to protect you, though you need no protection. I vow to honor you, though you demand no honor. I vow to love you, though I have no words adequate to express what you mean to me. You are the first dawn after endless night. You are the reason I remember I am human before I am king. This I swear on everything I am and everything I will ever be." When they kissed, the crowd erupted in cheers, but neither of them heard it. They were lost in each other, in the promise of what came next. The years that followed were not easy. Being queen to a kingdom was hard work, and Astrid refused to be merely decorative. She established training programs for women who wanted to learn to fight. She reformed corrupt practices in the court. She stood beside Oscar in every council meeting, every negotiation, every difficult decision. The first winter after their wedding brought new challenges. A plague swept through the southern territories, claiming lives indiscriminately. While the council argued about quarantine protocols and trade restrictions, Astrid rode out to the affected villages herself, despite Oscar's protests. "You cannot go," he had said, his voice tight with fear masked as authority. "You are the queen. Your life is too valuable to risk." "Then what good is being queen if I cannot help my people when they need me most?" she had countered, already packing supplies. "You taught me that leadership means sacrifice, Oscar. Or did you not mean those words?" He had grabbed her wrist, not roughly but desperately. "I cannot lose you. Do you understand? I survived before you, but I was not living. If you die, I die with you. Not physically, perhaps, but in every way that matters." She had softened then, seeing the raw terror in his eyes. "Then come with me. We will face this together, as we face everything. But I will not hide in the castle while people suffer." And so they had gone together, the Alpha King and his white-haired queen, riding into plague-stricken villages when everyone else fled. They helped burn the dead, delivered medicine, held the hands of dying children. It was gruesome, heartbreaking work that left them both changed. One night, after a particularly devastating day where they had lost an entire family, Astrid broke down in their tent. Oscar held her while she sobbed, his own tears falling silently into her hair. "I feel so helpless," she gasped between sobs. "All my strength, all my training, and I cannot fight death itself." "No one can," he murmured. "But you give them comfort. You give them the knowledge that their queen cares enough to be here, to bear witness to their pain. That matters more than you know." "Does it?" She looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Does it matter when they still die?" "Yes," he said firmly, "because they die knowing they were not forgotten, not dismissed, not invisible. You have given them dignity in death. That is a gift beyond measure." The plague eventually ran its course, but the experience bonded them in new ways. They had seen each other at their lowest, their most vulnerable, covered in ash and blood and tears, and they had loved each other through it. Astrid's reforms, born partly from that experience, changed the kingdom. She established healing houses in every major village, trained corps of healers, created systems to respond quickly to future outbreaks. The nobles grumbled about the cost, but Oscar backed her completely. "My queen has spoken," he would say in council meetings, his voice allowing no argument. "And what my queen decrees, I decree. If you have complaints, bring them to me directly. I am curious to hear why you value gold over lives." No one brought complaints directly to the Alpha King. His reputation was still too fearsome. But there were moments of lightness too. Moments that reminded them why they fought so hard. Like the summer festival where Oscar, after much persuasion from Astrid, agreed to participate in the traditional king's dance. He was surprisingly graceful for such a large man, spinning her across the cobblestones while the entire kingdom watched and cheered. "You are enjoying this," she accused, laughing as he dipped her dramatically. "I am enjoying you," he corrected, pulling her back up and close against his chest. "You could make me enjoy anything." Or the time Astrid convinced him to sneak out of the castle disguised as common travelers, just to walk through the market and see their kingdom through different eyes. They held hands like young lovers, bought roasted chestnuts from a vendor who did not recognize them, and sat by the fountain where their story began, simply existing together. "This is nice," Oscar had said, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the sunset. "Being no one." "You are never no one," Astrid replied. "You are always Oscar to me. The crown does not define you. Your heart does." He had kissed her then, sweet and unhurried, and for a moment they were just two people in love, not king and queen, but simply themselves. And she kept him human. When he became too cold, too kingly, she reminded him of the man who read love letters and braided her hair. When the crown weighed too heavy, she helped him carry it. When the darkness threatened to consume him again, she lit candles until he found his way back. There was one particularly dark period, 2 years into their marriage, when an assassination attempt nearly succeeded. The blade meant for Oscar had caught him in the shoulder instead of the heart, but the poison on it was deadly. He survived, but the experience left him shaken in ways the physical wound did not. "I thought of you," he told her weeks later, when he could finally speak of it. "In that moment when I thought I was dying, all I could think was that I would never see you again, that you would have to rule alone, that our children would grow up without me. The pain of the poison was nothing compared to that." Astrid had held him that night, both of them lying in bed with his head on her chest, her fingers running through his long black hair. "But you did not die. You are here, with me, and that is what matters. I want to grow old with you," he whispered. "I want to see our children have children. I want to sit on that fountain when we are gray and ancient and remember the day I found your diary. I want time, Astrid. So much more time." "Then we will have it," she promised. "We will have decades together. We will be those old people on the fountain, embarrassing our grandchildren with stories of how we met. We will have time, because we will fight for it, every single day." And they did. They fought for their time together, for their kingdom, for the life they were building. Sometimes the fight was against external enemies. Sometimes it was against the darkness within themselves, the doubts and fears and old scars that never quite healed. But they always fought together. In return, he loved her with a fierceness that bordered on worship. To the world, he remained the Alpha King, untouchable and absolute. In the throne room, his word was law, his presence commanding immediate silence. He negotiated with rival kingdoms with cold calculation, crushed rebellions with merciless efficiency. Visiting dignitaries often left his presence pale and shaking, speaking in hushed whispers about the Alpha King's legendary intensity. But with her, in the private spaces they carved out from the weight of crowns and kingdoms, he was just Oscar, vulnerable, loving, occasionally jealous, often ridiculous, and entirely hers. He would read to her every night before sleep, his deep voice turning even mundane texts into poetry. He memorized her preferences, the way she liked her tea prepared, the specific temperature of bathwater that made her sigh with contentment. He noticed when she was tired and would massage her feet while she told him about her day. He learned to braid hair properly so he could help her with the intricate styles befitting a queen. "You spoil me," she said once, watching him carefully weave tiny flowers into her white braids for a state dinner. "I worship you," he corrected matter-of-factly. "There is a difference. Spoiling implies indulgence without thought. Everything I do for you is intentional, considered, necessary for my own peace of mind." "Necessary?" She smiled at him in the mirror. "How else can I ensure you know, every single day, that you are cherished beyond all reason? Words are insufficient. Actions speak louder." He finished the braid, his large hands surprisingly deft. "There, beautiful. Though you are always beautiful, even covered in mud after sword practice." "Especially then," she teased. "Especially then," he agreed seriously. "Because that is when you are most yourself, wild and fierce and utterly magnificent." 2 years after their marriage, Astrid gave birth to their first child, a boy with his father's black hair and his mother's storm-gray eyes. They named him Kieran, which meant "little dark one" in the old tongue. The labor had been long and difficult, 26 hours of pain that had Oscar pacing outside the birthing chamber like a caged animal, despite Astrid's insistence that he stay with her. The midwives had finally allowed him in when it became clear his anxiety was affecting the entire castle, and he had held Astrid's hand while she screamed and pushed and brought their son into the world. Oscar held his son for the first time and wept. Tears he had not shed even during his father's funeral, even during the worst battles, flowed freely as he looked at this tiny, perfect human he had helped create. Kieran's eyes opened, unfocused but searching, and when they landed on Oscar's face, the baby made a small sound, almost like recognition. "He knows you," Astrid said from the bed, exhausted but glowing. "He already knows his father's voice." "I do not know how to be a father," Oscar confessed, his voice breaking. "My father taught me only cruelty. He beat me for showing emotion, for being soft. He said a king must be hard as stone. What if I become him? What if I hurt our son the way he hurt me?" Astrid sat up despite the midwife's protests, reaching for her husband. "Look at me, Oscar. You are crying while holding your son. Your father would have seen that as weakness. But it is strength. The greatest strength is allowing yourself to love so completely that you become vulnerable to pain. You already are not him. But what if—" "Then you will teach him the opposite," Astrid interrupted firmly. "You will teach him love and strength. And that vulnerability is not weakness. You will be the father you needed, Oscar. I know you will because I know your heart. I have read it, remember? In your eyes, in your actions, in the way you hold me when you think I am asleep. You are not your father. You are so much more." And he was. Kieran grew up knowing his father not as the feared Alpha King, but as the man who told him bedtime stories with funny voices for all the characters. The man who played elaborate games of castle siege where Kieran always won, despite being a toddler facing a warrior king. The man who showed him how to be strong without being cruel, how to be gentle without being weak. Oscar's favorite time of day became the hour before sunset when he would take Kieran to the gardens and teach him about the plants, the insects, the way the world fit together. They would lie in the grass and watch clouds, and Kieran would point at shapes only children could see. "That one looks like a dragon," Kieran said once, his small finger aimed at the sky. He was 4 years old, still young enough to believe in magic. "Does it?" Oscar squinted at the cloud. "I see more of a rabbit." "Papa, you have no imagination," Kieran declared with the absolute certainty of childhood. "You are probably right," Oscar agreed, pulling his son close. "But I have you to imagine for me. That is better than any imagination I could have on my own." The castle staff watched these transformations with wonder. The warriors who had once trembled before the Alpha King's wrath now smiled to see him crawling on the floor, growling like a bear while Kieran shrieked with delighted terror. The council members who had faced his cold displeasure now witnessed him leaving important meetings early to attend Kieran's first recital or watch him learn to ride a pony. "The king has changed," Elder Theron observed to Astrid one day. "Fatherhood has softened him." "No," Astrid corrected gently. "Fatherhood has freed him. He was always this man. I just helped him remember it was safe to be himself." 3 years later, their second child arrived, a daughter with white hair and dark eyes, the perfect inversion of her brother. They named her Lyanna, after Astrid's mother who had died when Astrid was young. Lyanna was fierce from birth, entering the world with a battle cry that made even the midwives laugh. She had Astrid's determination and Oscar's intensity, a combination that promised future challenges. And Oscar doted on her shamelessly from the first moment he held her. "She is perfect," he breathed, staring down at his daughter as she gripped his finger with surprising strength. "She will rule kingdoms. She will break hearts. She will be unstoppable." "She will be whatever she chooses to be," Astrid said, smiling at her husband's immediate devotion. "But yes, she will be unstoppable. Look at her parents." As Lyanna grew, she proved even more headstrong than they anticipated. By age 3, she was demanding sword lessons like her mother. By age 4, she was organizing the other noble children into elaborate battle formations. By age 5, she had declared she would be a knight, not a princess, and anyone who disagreed could fight her. The warriors who had once trembled before the Alpha King's wrath now watched in amusement as he played tea party with his tiny daughter, wearing a flower crown she had woven for him with chubby, determined fingers. She would pour imaginary tea and lecture him seriously about proper etiquette, while he nodded gravely, treating her game with the same attention he gave state matters. "You have to extend your pinky, Papa," Lyanna instructed, demonstrating with her own small finger. "That is how ladies drink tea." Oscar extended his pinky, looking ridiculous with his massive warrior's hand delicately holding an imaginary teacup. "Like this, princess?" "Perfect," she clapped. "Now you are a proper gentleman." "Mama, is Papa not a proper gentleman?" Astrid, watching from the doorway with Kieran, smiled. "The very finest gentleman in all the kingdoms." "You have made me soft," Oscar complained to Astrid that evening as they watched their children play in the gardens. Kieran was teaching Lyanna how to climb trees, despite her being less than half his size. She was fearless, reaching for branches that should have been too high, trusting completely that her brother would catch her if she fell. "I have made you happy," Astrid corrected, leaning into his side. "There is a difference. You are still the Alpha King who terrifies visiting dignitaries and crushes rebellions. You are still the warrior who once fought 20 men and emerged victorious. But now you are also a father who wears flower crowns and plays tea party. That is not weakness, Oscar. That is wholeness." He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close, and knew she was right. He was happy. Truly, completely, impossibly happy. He had a mate who challenged him, children who adored him, a kingdom that prospered. He had everything he never knew he needed until a lost diary showed him the way. "I love you," he said simply, pressing a kiss to her temple. "For giving me this, for giving me them, for giving me myself back." "I love you too," she replied. "For letting me, for choosing me, for being brave enough to read a foolish girl's diary and ask if it was true." "Not foolish," he corrected. "Honest. There is a difference." On the 10th anniversary of the day he found her diary, Oscar took Astrid back to that same fountain in the village square. The village had grown, prospered under their rule, but the fountain remained unchanged, a monument to beginnings and unlikely love stories. The square was empty at sunset, which Oscar had arranged by asking the merchants to close early. He wanted this moment to be theirs alone. No audience, no expectations. Just two people returning to where everything began. "Do you remember this place?" he asked, though he knew the answer. "I remember thinking my world was ending," Astrid said, a soft smile playing on her lips. "I remember seeing you holding my diary and feeling like my heart was going to beat out of my chest. I remember thinking I would die of embarrassment before I reached you. And now?" He traced the line of her jaw with gentle fingers. "Now I think about how close I came to running away. If I had let fear win, if I had turned and fled instead of walking toward you, we would not have any of this. Our children would not exist. This kingdom would still have a lonely king ruling from behind walls no one could penetrate." She covered his hand with hers. "I am grateful I was brave that day. Even when I did not feel brave, I chose courage anyway." "You have always been brave," Oscar said, "from the moment you wrote those words knowing someone might find them someday. That took more courage than facing an army." He pulled something from his pocket. Her diary, worn and well read, its pages softened by countless revisitations. "I still have it. I read it sometimes when I need to remember." "Remember what?" She looked at the diary with a mixture of fondness and embarrassment. "That I was not always stone. That there was a time when I forgot how to feel, and a brave, foolish girl reminded me." He opened the diary to a random page, his voice dropping to something intimate and reverent as he read aloud. "I dream of being the place where the fierce Alpha King lays down his armor. They say he is untouchable, unreachable, forged from iron and ice. But I see the loneliness in his eyes when he thinks no one is watching. I see it because I carry the same ache." His voice caught, emotion thickening his words. "You saw me, Astrid. When no one else could. When I could not even see myself, you saw me. You looked past the crown and the reputation and the carefully constructed walls, and you saw the man underneath. The one who was drowning in loneliness and did not even know it until you threw him a lifeline made of honest words and impossible hope." Astrid felt tears prick her eyes. After 10 years, after everything they had been through, his words could still undo her completely. "And you asked me if what I wrote was true. Do you remember what I said?" "Every word is true," he quoted, his memory perfect. "You stood there in your crimson dress with your white hair wild around your face, and you looked me in the eye and claimed every vulnerable, honest, dangerous word. I fell in love with you in that moment. Not the slow fall, not the gradual realization. In that instant, when you chose honesty over safety, I knew you were mine, and I was yours." "Still true," she whispered, reaching up to cup his face. "Every single word. I love you more now than I did when I wrote those pages. You gave me a life I never dreamed possible. A partnership built on respect and passion and friendship. Children who will never know what it is to feel unloved. A kingdom that thrives because we rule it together, not as king and consort, but as equals who complement each other's strengths." "You gave me more," Oscar said, his hands framing her face like she was something precious and breakable. though they both knew she was anything but. You gave me myself. The version of me I was always meant to be before my father twisted me with his cruelty, before the crown hardened me into someone I barely recognized. You showed me the man I could be if I was brave enough to try. And I am trying, every day, to be worthy of your love. You already are, she said firmly. You are the man who reads bedtime stories in funny voices, who wears flower crowns because his daughter asks, who holds me when I have nightmares about the plague, about the people we could not save, who understands that being strong does not mean never being afraid. It means being afraid and doing what must be done anyway. You are worthy, Oscar. You have always been worthy. They kissed then, there by the fountain where their story began, and it felt like coming full circle. The kiss was sweet and deep and familiar, tasting of 10 years of love and infinity more to come. When they pulled apart, Oscar rested his forehead against hers, breathing her in. 10 years, he murmured. It feels like yesterday, and like forever all at once. That is what happens when you find your other half, Astrid said. Time becomes elastic. A day feels like a lifetime. A lifetime feels like it passes in a heartbeat. I would live 1,000 lifetimes with you, Oscar. And if there is something after this life, I will find you there too. Promise? His voice was almost childlike, vulnerable in a way he only ever was with her. Promise, she swore. You are stuck with me across all lives, all realms, all possibilities. Where you go, I follow. That is what the diary really meant, beneath all the romantic words and adolescent longing. It meant that my soul recognized yours. That is not something death can undo. They spent the rest of the evening by the fountain, talking about everything and nothing. About the challenges ahead, about watching their children grow, about growing old together. They talked about the kingdom they would leave behind, the legacy they were building not just in stone and law, but in the lives they touched, the people they helped. The love they showed was possible even for those who seemed incapable of it. As they walked home together, hand in hand, the moon rising silver and full above them, Oscar thought about legacy. Not the legacy of conquest or power, but the legacy that mattered. The children who would grow up knowing love was strength, not weakness. The kingdom that prospered because its rulers genuinely cared. The story that would be told long after they were gone, about the Alpha King who learned to love from the words in a lost diary. What are you thinking about? Astrid asked, reading his pensive expression. About how our story will be remembered, he admitted. About what we leave behind. We leave behind proof, she said simply. Proof that even the loneliest heart can learn to love. That even the most feared king can be gentle. That partnerships built on honesty and respect last longer than kingdoms built on fear. That is our legacy, Oscar. Not the battles you won or the territories you conquered. The proof that love is real, that transformation is possible, that it is never too late to become who you were always meant to be. He squeezed her hand, feeling the truth of her words settle deep in his chest. I love you, he said. Not for the first time that night, not for the 1,000th time in their marriage, but every time he said it, it felt new, felt necessary, felt like the most important thing he would ever say. I know, she replied, smiling up at him with those storm-gray eyes that had seen him at his worst and his best and loved both versions. I read it in your eyes every time you look at me, just like you read my love in the diary. We were never good at hiding what we felt. We just needed to be brave enough to speak it. As they walked home together, hand in hand, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold, echoing the colors of their first meeting. Their children were waiting at the castle, probably terrorizing the staff with whatever game Lyanna had invented today. The kingdom was at peace, prosperous and safe under their joint rule. And the Alpha King, who had once believed himself incapable of love, walked beside his queen, his mate, his partner, and knew he had found something more valuable than any crown, more powerful than any kingdom. He had found home. Years later, when Kieran was old enough to understand, Oscar sat him down and told him the story of how he met Kieran's mother. They were in the library, the same room where Oscar had spent so many lonely nights before Astrid appeared in his life. Now it was filled with warmth, with the sound of children playing in distant halls, with evidence of life truly lived. Kieran was 13 now, already tall and broad-shouldered like his father, but with his mother's thoughtful nature. He sat beside Oscar on the worn leather sofa, listening with the intensity of someone who understood this story was important, that it contained lessons he would need someday. "I was walking through the village," Oscar began, his eyes distant with memory. "I had just left a council meeting where they were discussing trade agreements and territorial disputes, and I felt hollow, empty, like I was going through the motions of being king without ever feeling alive. Then I saw something lying by the fountain. A small book bound in red leather. The diary," Kieran breathed, having heard pieces of this story before but never the full version. "The diary," Oscar confirmed. "I should have walked past it, left it for whoever lost it to find, but something pulled me toward it, like fate itself was tugging on an invisible thread attached to my heart. So I picked it up, and I started reading." He told Kieran about the words that had changed everything, about the honest vulnerability that had cracked open his carefully constructed armor. He told him about Astrid appearing, terrified and brave all at once, about the question that started everything. "Is what's written here true?" Kieran repeated, testing the words on his tongue. "And Mother said yes?" "She said every word was true," Oscar confirmed, his voice softening with remembered wonder. "She stood there in her crimson dress, her white hair wild around her face, and she owned every vulnerable, honest, dangerous word. Most people would have lied, would have laughed it off as a joke or dismissed it as foolishness. But your mother looked me in the eye and claimed every word. That took more courage than any battle I have ever fought." Kieran was quiet for a moment, processing. Then he asked, "Were you afraid when you realized you loved her?" Oscar considered the question carefully, knowing his son deserved the truth. "Terrified. I had built my entire existence on being untouchable, on never allowing anyone close enough to hurt me. My father taught me that love was weakness, that emotion was a liability. For years I believed him. I made myself into stone, into something that could not be wounded because it could not feel. Then your mother appeared with her impossible honesty and reminded me I was human, that I had always been human, just buried under layers of armor and fear. But you chose her anyway," Kieran said, "even though you were afraid." "Especially because I was afraid," Oscar corrected. "True courage is not the absence of fear, son. It is being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. I was terrified of loving your mother. Terrified she would see the man beneath the crown and find him lacking. Terrified I would hurt her the way my father hurt me. Terrified I did not know how to love anyone properly because I had never been taught. But I chose her anyway because the alternative, a life without her, was more terrifying than any of those fears." Kieran absorbed this wisdom, his young face serious beyond his years. "Did you ever regret it? Choosing love over safety?" "Never," Oscar said with absolute certainty. "Not for a single moment. Your mother gave me everything I did not know I was missing. She gave me you and your sister. She gave me purpose beyond power. She gave me a reason to be better than the man my father tried to create. Every difficult moment, every challenge, every time I had to choose between being the hard king or the loving husband and father, I chose love, and I have never regretted it. Will I find love like that?" Kieran asked, his voice smaller now, more vulnerable. The kind that changes everything? Oscar pulled his son close, remembering asking his mother a similar question once. She had told him that love finds everyone eventually, if they are brave enough to let it. He gave Kieran a similar answer now, but with the wisdom of someone who had lived through it. If you are very, very lucky, Oscar said gently, and if you are brave enough to recognize it when it appears, sometimes love comes in the most unexpected ways, at the most unexpected times. A lost diary by a fountain, a glance across a crowded room, a friend who suddenly becomes something more. The key is being open enough to receive it when it arrives, and courageous enough to choose it even when it scares you. He paused, then added, "But more importantly, son, you must be someone worth loving. Your mother did not fall in love with the Alpha King. She fell in love with the man who smiled at children when he thought no one was watching, the man who had lonely eyes because he felt too much, not too little. The man who was vulnerable enough to hope that maybe someone could see past his armor. Be that man, Kieran. Be kind. Be honest. Be brave enough to be vulnerable. Those are the qualities that attract real love, not power or status or any of the external things people chase." Kieran nodded, committing these words to memory. "I want to be like you, Papa. Strong but gentle. Fierce but loving." "Then you already are," Oscar said, ruffling his son's black hair. "Because you are asking these questions, thinking about these things. You are not taking love for granted or seeing it as weakness. You understand it is the greatest strength. That understanding alone puts you ahead of where I was at your age." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, father and son, sharing the weight of wisdom passed down. Finally, Kieran asked one more question, his voice soft. "Do you think Mother knew? When she wrote the diary, do you think she knew somehow that you would find it? That it would change both your lives?" Oscar smiled, considering. "I think your mother's heart knew what her mind could not. I think some part of her was calling out to some part of me, and the universe heard and arranged the rest. Or perhaps it was just coincidence, chaos, random chance that brought us together. But it does not matter which. What matters is that when the moment came, when I asked if what she wrote was true, she said yes. She chose honesty. She chose courage. She chose me. And I chose her. That is what love is, Kieran. A series of choices to be brave, to be honest, to be vulnerable, over and over again, every single day." That night, Oscar found Astrid on their private balcony, looking out over the kingdom they had built together. The same balcony where they had stood countless times, sharing worries and triumphs, watching their children grow, planning for the future. She turned when she heard him approach, her white hair silver in the moonlight, and smiled. "How did it go with Kieran?" she asked. "I told him our story," Oscar said, moving to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "The real story, the vulnerable parts, the frightening parts, the honest parts." "And what did he think?" She leaned back against his chest, fitting perfectly as she always had. "I think he understood that love is not easy, but it is worth it. That choosing someone is more powerful than needing someone. That vulnerability is strength." Oscar rested his chin on top of her head. "I think we gave him a good example to follow." "We gave him the truth," Astrid said. "That is the best gift we could offer." They stood together in silence for a moment, comfortable in the way only longtime lovers could be. Then Astrid spoke again, her voice thoughtful. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, turning in his arms to face him. "About how close we came to never happening," Oscar admitted. "About all the small choices that led us here. If I had not walked through the village that day, if I had not picked up the diary, if you had run away instead of facing me, if either of us had chosen safety over courage, we would not have any of this. Our children would not exist. The kingdom would be different. I would still be that lonely king ruling from behind walls no one could penetrate. But we did happen, Astrid said, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. Against all odds, despite all fear, through all obstacles, we happened. And we will keep happening, every day for the rest of our lives, because that is what we chose, what we keep choosing. Do you believe in destiny? Oscar asked, repeating the question from years ago. I believe in you, Astrid replied with the same answer she had given then. And I believe that everything I went through, every lonely moment, every time I felt invisible and overlooked, it was all leading me to you. So I could recognize you when I saw you. So I could have the courage to write down my feelings. So I could say yes, when you asked if what I wrote was true. Yes, I believe in destiny, because you are mine. Oscar kissed her then, slow and deep and full of 10 years of love, and a lifetime more to come. When they pulled apart, they stood together looking out at their kingdom, their hands intertwined, two hearts beating as one. Somewhere in the castle, their children laughed, Lyanna probably challenging Kieran to some impossible feat. Somewhere in the village, young lovers exchanged nervous glances, writing their own beginnings. Somewhere, someone was writing words they believed no one else would ever read, not knowing those words might change everything. And Oscar Darkspire, the Alpha King who had learned that strength and love were not opposing forces but complementary ones, held his queen and his soulmate close, grateful every day for the lost diary that found its way into his hands and changed his life forever. The years continued to unfold like the pages of a beautiful book. Kieran grew into a young man who embodied the best of both parents, strong and gentle, fierce and kind. He fell in love at 19 with a warrior woman from the Eastern Territories. And when he brought her home to meet his parents, Oscar saw the same intensity in his son's eyes that he knew reflected in his own when he looked at Astrid. Lyanna proved just as formidable as predicted, becoming the kingdom's youngest knight at 17 and eventually leading the royal guard with a combination of tactical brilliance and fierce loyalty. She never married, declaring she loved the kingdom itself and needed no other partner. Oscar and Astrid supported her choice completely, proud of her independence and strength. As Oscar and Astrid grew older, their love only deepened. They became those old people they had joked about years ago, sitting by the fountain and embarrassing their grandchildren with stories of how they met. Oscar's black hair turned silver at the temples, then fully white, matching Astrid's. Her face gained lines around her eyes from decades of smiling. His hands, still strong but marked with the scars of a warrior's life, trembled slightly when he braided her hair now. But he never stopped braiding it. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the entire kingdom celebrated. But Oscar and Astrid slipped away from the festivities, returning once again to the fountain where everything began. 50 years, Astrid said, holding his hand as they sat on the fountain's edge. Half a century since you asked me if what I wrote was true. And your answer is still the same? Oscar asked, though he knew. He had always known. Every word true, she confirmed. More true now than ever. I loved you then, with the passion of youth, with dreams and hopes and idealistic notions. I love you now with the depth of 50 years, with knowledge of every flaw and strength, with memories of every joy and sorrow we shared. The love now is richer, deeper, more real. It has been tested and proven and strengthened by time. Oscar reached into his pocket and pulled out the diary, impossibly still preserved after all these years. The leather was cracked now, the pages yellowed and delicate, but the words remained, faded but legible, a testament to where everything began. I am afraid to open it anymore, he confessed, afraid it will crumble to dust, but I cannot let it go either. Then we will preserve it, Astrid said. We will have it protected, sealed behind glass perhaps, so future generations can see it, so they can know that love like ours is possible, that it starts with honesty and courage and the willingness to be vulnerable. They had the diary preserved in the castle's library, displayed with a plaque that read, "The Diary That Changed a Kingdom," written by Queen Astrid before she was queen, read by King Oscar before he knew how to love. A reminder that the greatest transformations begin with honest words and brave hearts. It became a pilgrimage site for young lovers, who would come to read the words and be inspired, to remember that love is not about grand gestures or perfect moments, but about showing up honestly, day after day, choosing each other over and over again. In the end, it all came down to a single question and a single answer. Is what's written here true? Every word. And in that truth, in that brave, foolish honesty, they had found everything. They had found each other. They had found home. They had found love that lasted lifetimes, that built kingdoms, that proved even the loneliest heart could learn to beat for someone else. They had found proof that transformation was possible, that it was never too late to become who you were always meant to be. And that, as it turned out, was the greatest power of all. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.